MFs, welcome back. Hustle Like You Broke, still here with Patrick Dearson from The Activity. His company, The Activity, otherwise not to be confused with another company I may have fucked up and referred to in the last episode. I apologize sincerely. I was mortified by that. Patrick Dearson and The Activity, coming to us from a secure location, a bunker somewhere where he cannot otherwise be found, seen, or known for. What we are finding is an increasingly interesting past. I feel like he should be not only a production designer, but also a manager, a tour accountant, a hitman, a production manager, a tour director, and all of the above. Perhaps he does. Perhaps he uses different names. Perhaps that's why he's able to, do all of these things and see all these things, and requires tactical weaponry training. And with that in mind, Patrick, welcome back. Thank you for being
a very kind introduction. Thank you for having me back.
I think we had
before we jump into everything, I want to address something. Kyle, I just want to say much love to you. I haven't seen you in ages. I know you're unable to be with us, dealing with some family stuff, and I just wish you guys all the health and happiness, and hope to see you very soon.
Well, we all feel that way, and I appreciate you saying that. Patrick is also a compassionate gentleman. He is exceptionally well-spoken. We talked a lot about politics in part 1. If you missed that, check it out. I can't imagine you did, but just in case, listen back, listen again. By the end of this, if we can get him out of that bunker, he might just run for president. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about The Activity. Let's talk about, first and foremost, his role as a production designer. We've heard how he got there. We've heard how he come up so far. You've heard me in the past on this program refer to so many creative designers as what I call, and you didn't see the air quotes around the word creative designers, as what I call pretty picture makers. And we had Corey Fitzgerald on the program. He is a creative designer, and a very good one at that. By no means just a pretty picture maker, but he is a lighting designer and a creative designer. Patrick, you call yourself a production designer. Please tell us first about that distinction.
Well, having started out in lighting, and being a lighting technician, a lighting programmer, subsequently studying design, becoming a lighting designer. One of the things that shifted my career a little bit was the advent of the media server in that world, and how lighting had slowly started to invade the discipline of video. I've been really blessed with the fact that I've been able to be the first on a lot of things. I don't say that with any amount of braggadocio, but the fact of being able to use some of the technologies before they had been truly released to the public. And one of those technologies was what ultimately became high-end systems Catalyst video media server. And it was one of the first video servers that could be controlled from a lighting console. And I had seen it in its prototype form at a trade show, and it wasn't being featured. It was sort of off in the corner and sort of tucked away. And it was doing something wildly shiny and cool. And I gravitated toward it. I said, "What's the deal?" And they said, "Oh, that's this thing we're working on." They kind of dismissed it. I said, No. I want to know what is that? That is totally cool. And we got that aligned, and I got to use it. Brad Schiller, who was working for High End Systems at the time, literally brought the prototype. He flew it in from the Plaza Expo in time to make it to do rehearsals for the we're doing the season opener of the New York Rangers, and I think this was in 2000 or 2001. And as I started to work with this thing, I realized that just like a light, it had gobos, but there were these video clips, so sort of 10-second, 30-second loopable video clips. And I quickly realized that you run out of them pretty fast. And that led to seeing a need that it may have been time to start a new business. And I joined forces with a dear friend of mine at the time, Rob McLaughlin, and we formed a company called Idle Hands Imagery, and we became a very popular media server content source. So we started this content company and all we sort of dealt with was making these little loopable clips, a lot of it for the low resolution video technologies that were a rage at the time. And that really forced me into the video world. So now I'm designing lighting and video. And as is often the case with lighting directors, the production will often turn to them for a bit more of the staging direction and how that gets designed. And I was also starting to work in the lane of large scale corporate events, as well as just outside of the concert industry, and sort of diversifying, and got involved in scenic design and started to have a love for that. So in the end, throughout all of these years of experience, I ended up realizing, well, I'm not, clients were coming to me not just to design lighting anymore. They were coming for a full turnkey package. And one of the things that we ultimately became as the activity is a production design house. And whereas we are certainly capable of being creative and doing a creative design, we actually push ourselves out of that lane where possible and focus on delivery of true production design. And as you stated earlier, there's a big difference between creative design and production design. And it was born and bred out of a need of gentleness that I saw when very, very often with concert touring in particular, a musical artist will get focused on a creative designer or a creative director, and they will just follow them down the path of the art. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great thing because they're being represented a little bit out of the box in many instances, because a lot of these designers or artists don't necessarily come from a concert touring world, and they don't understand the perspective of that. And what I was seeing was a lot of backlash toward the arts community of these artists by productions, because the fact of the matter is, when you have somebody like that, if you have just a creative, someone that does just create a pretty picture, and they don't know how to deliver that, the production manager is the one that usually gets stuck holding the bag, and they have to now deliver this somehow. And they in turn stick the vendors with a lot of the contents of that bag. And ultimately, somehow this thing gets made, and it's not necessarily made efficiently, cost effectively. It's not necessarily made with the financial best interests of the promoters, producers, or the artist in mind. And when that wasn't being done, I was just seeing artists get told, no, fuck off, can't do it, not doing it, push it away. And I thought it was rather unfair, because I was seeing a lot of great art get tossed out the window. And it was all because these people didn't know what they were doing. Once again, not in a negative way. It was the innocence of ignorance to the platform of how this needs to be presented. They don't necessarily, or didn't necessarily understand that there are space constraints on a stage. There are space constraints within an arena. There are constraints where you may want to avoid breaking the dasher line in an arena with your design for rigging, trussing, and all these other purposes, because the routing schedule of the tour doesn't necessarily lend itself to being able to accommodate the extra time it's going to take each day to do that kind of thing. They wouldn't necessarily understand how you do have to design something, and then it's going to break down in a fashion that fits into a bunch of boxes and needs to travel 300 miles in a few hours and get to the next place to do it all over again. And so we saw a gap, and within that gap is certainly an opportunity to help. And the concept had been around for a very long time, and was one I was actually cultivating when I was working with a particular artist in his larger organization. And we ultimately decided that the activity needed to be born in a way to sort of remove my name off of the bill so that people didn't feel like it's Patrick Dearson's company that's helping you. I didn't want it to be like that. I just wanted to create something that was bigger than me to provide that service, to be the intermediaries and cultivate that creativity and be able to be a service to both the creatives and the artists, the performing artists, to make sure that we can look at that and stop being the no guys. It's, you look at something and somebody draws a pretty picture. It breaks every concept of the law of physics. There's no way you could possibly do it. And we wanted to be the people you could take that to and go, all right, give us a minute. Let's take a look at it. Not say no, but say, okay, here's how we could probably pull this off. You want something to levitate in thin air and you need it to look like magic. Okay, well, here are the constraints you're going to face. And being that intermediary of language and visual language translation so that everybody is on the same page and understands the abilities and limitations of producing or bringing that creative idea to reality. And what that in the end does is it manages expectations for everyone involved. We're able to give the forewarning of saying, okay, yeah, you can do that. Heads up, you're going to need to be able to stand on your wallet. This is going to cost a small fortune to pull off because of the way it may need to be engineered and pulled apart to fit into trucks because you haven't thought about that back end of it. Or you're asking for something that a budget simply won't support. So how about we go down the avenue of a few of these things? Here are your high ticket items. Perhaps we can change these around in a way to make them cost effective and pull it off. Or maybe you're not married to them. Maybe that's the thing you're willing to sacrifice and get rid of it. And we help manage that part of the creative process and in turn act in the fashion of true production design so that when the client that's ultimately writing the check for this is getting something vastly more than just that pretty picture. And we've really tried to steer a little more clearly out of the lane of being the ones responsible for the actual creative, because quite frankly, just like opinion, everybody's got an idea. It doesn't make you special. Everybody can come up with a cool idea. Actually executing it, that's what separates the professionals from the kid that just went to Coachella, did a hit off a vape pen and decided that they were going to call themselves a creative director.
I love that description, and I appreciate you being thorough. I feel like I've been thrust into that position myself a few times where I have to figure out that translation from picture to stage, and it's certainly not on the scale I think of some of the things you're describing, but it's not easy when it falls on the production manager or somebody
No,
else
it
to
sucks. And quite
translate
frankly,
that
just
vision.
like the production managers, but they're not artists. And so you're handing them a bag of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
You can't necessarily expect, all the scaffolding to be exposed, when he makes it. You go, oh, well, this actually needed a little more art direction. Okay, well, perhaps you should have not handed this to the guy that's really trying to move the production around and make it more efficient for his client and laden him with yet another job that should have been taken care of already. We were trying to alleviate the production managers, alleviate the tour accountants, alleviate the vendors from taking on so much of that burden. And in the end, what we've realized is that we do become, for whatever our bill is, what we're bringing to the table becomes such a value-added service of cost efficiency that it pales in comparison to the overall bills. And it's really worked out well, thank God, knock on wood. It's been a nice journey.
Well, it sounds like you're bringing others along with you for that journey too. So we appreciate that. So why don't you tell us a little more about this haven you've created at the academy activity? I'm reading the word, and it's still coming out wrong. Time to stop smoking dope. Got it. Next. Um, I mean, we've talked a lot about mentorship on this program. We've talked to a couple of people who believe in the value and importance of bringing along the next generation. You've alluded to that. Again, you used the word haven. Tell us about the haven that you've created at the activity.
It's it's really just there to be the service. We have a section of the activity that we call strategic partnership services, and it's solely designed to help other designers with that side of the technical delivery process. We brand it different ways where the designer can work under the flag of the activity, which obviously affords them a lot of other assurances, such as, ultimately we're doing the job in the end, so it's covered under our insurance policies and things of that nature. So there's a lot of value add to that. Or we don't do any of that and we rebrand it solely with that designer's brand. And ultimately, one way or the other, we're helping those designers, those creatives, build their own brand and go up the ladder themselves to the point where they don't need us anymore. And that's the ultimate goal. And I think a lot of people would look at that as being fucking crazy because, well, aren't you just making competition? And we don't see it that way at all. Quite frankly, we've seen a few people try to imitate the business model, and nobody has truly thrived at doing it at all. Most have failed miserably because they don't truly understand the level of commitment and hard work it takes to do that. You can't just be a one-man show with a laptop and provide the same level of service hanging out all week and just just working when the emails come in and knocking out a few of the tasks. We do a lot of 16-hour days around here, but much to my wife's chagrin, who hates the fact that I work so much. But it's what it takes to deliver that kind of product and make it value additive for the clients. And in the end, what we're doing is ultimately mentoring through our service, and we're teaching how the next generation and even the older generation, mind you, because I have a lot of we serviced a lot of other very well established designers in the industry who simply want a more professional presentation. They've come and said, listen, I want to deliver. I don't want to hand upstaging a napkin plot anymore. I really would like to see this done professionally, so that my client feels that they're getting a little more for the money than how I normally present myself. Or they're in the creative process at the beginning and cultivating the ideas, and they want renderings done in a way that are much more upscale than what they would put forth. A lot of young designers are coming to us where they're thrown in the mix of bidding creatively against very well established designers. And having been there myself, what an overwhelming feeling artistically, to have to put forth a rendered creative bid of a beautiful idea, knowing that you don't have the technical knowledge, artistic drawing capability, or resources to present something of that level. And you know that in your heart of hearts that your creative idea blows away a well-established designer's idea who may have just shit this out really quick and it's a half-copied thing off of something he's done before. But he knows he's going to lose it because there's name recognition and the picture's way prettier. And so a lot of them come to us just for that. Hey, can you up my game? Would you do a set of renderings for us that have our logo on it so that we can at least give this a shot? This is a one-shot deal. This may make or break our next evolution in our company to be able to get this artist tour. We'll help cultivate that talent. because in the end, I always look at these things as I'm rarely competing against any of these guys on these things. I don't. These usually jobs that personally I don't want anything to do with. I've really got to a point in my career where I've become a little crotchety about the whole concept of concert touring and being a part of that overall creative process and how much of a time suck it is for me personally, and it's just not my personal desire, having been there and done it already. So I'd much rather see these guys thrive and help cultivate them while still providing a service within the business that is using all the expertise and all the vast knowledge that we've accumulated over the years and being able to help present that kind of stuff. So hopefully in the end, we're helping the next generation and paying it a little forward. And of course, building a much larger system of a company in the process.
Sounds like you're raising the bar, paying it forward. I love all that. That's fantastic. So
Trying.
tell us something else then. So over the years, you've obviously been doing this a long time. There seem to be a couple of trends that are accelerating, and we hope we here at Hustle Like You Broke will continue accelerating coming out of the pandemic, and that would be the emergence of new technologies, not just in terms of lighting and video, but also in terms of AR, VR, XR. Um, and at the same time, there's also been a push for greater sustainability, which I'd imagine also factors into some of your design work.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, it's such a difficult thing as we plan on what's on the other side of this. Uh, I've been really blessed to have been invited into way more fucking Zoom calls than I ever wanted to in my life through this whole thing, but most of which have been focused on the business and have thrust us into the company of a lot of heavy hitters and business leaders within the industry, and it's been a wonderful time to be able to network with them. A lot of them, with the mentorship capabilities and being able to push ideas back and forth, but primarily to have an understanding of what it's going to take as we come out of this. And I think that on the technology side, certainly, everybody and their fucking brothers doing AR, XR, MR, whatever the hell you want to call it. The volume of the Mandalorian, as I like to just narrow it down to, because that's really where it all came from. Um, Everybody's doing that. There's obviously the big shift to that. I am not discounting its importance and its creative use. There's tons of stuff you can do with it. We've seen some interesting things done with it. We've seen a lot of one tricks with it. I'm not sure that technology in the way it's currently being used is something that is visually sustainable. I think it's great to be able to do a performance with it and make something special out of it. But there's only so many times you can utilize that technology without it looking like a Super Mario Brothers game of hopping from one mushroom to the next. And I think it gets a little, or it's going to get a little stale after a while. Our audiences are very savvy and crave more. So perhaps we'll see some more development on other visual technologies that help push this along. But more importantly, in regards to sustainability, I think that what we're really going to see become one of the hardest hit sectors of our industry are the equipment manufacturers. Because coming out of this, we will have effectively seen vendor houses sitting on equipment for roughly a year or more potentially. Horrible thing to think of, but the true reality of it. As a designer, if I come out of this gate saying, all right, well, I want the latest, greatest whiz bang looking toys on the tour, I cannot expect anything other than to be blacklisted from the industry. Because if you go out and make PRG or a four wall go spend $100,000 or more on a bunch of new technology just because you can't pull off putting a show together with what's on the shelf at that time, you're not going to be received warmly at all. And so I think there's a huge responsibility for us as designers to once again be considerate and gentle to the rest in the industry, and understand that if there was never a time before to use what's on these shelves, this is it, and get that stuff back on the payroll for them and generate an income. Subsequently, I think we're going to see a lot of our manufacturers hit pretty hard in that regard. And the only thing I can help encourage is to hit the insurance companies hard. So guys, if you can design rigs with a lot of stuff that hangs out in the rain and gets fucked up, I think that'll be great, because we can put in insurance claims and get some parts manufacturing going for these guys. It might generate some income for them. But I think it's going to be a tough road for everybody.
Now, I think that that's wise to look at recycled parts, and I appreciate what you're saying, certainly about suggesting any of the major companies go and manufacture new product coming out of this. But I'm curious what that does for companies like Tate Towers and those that are in the business of new construction and putting these pieces together. How do you think that, how are they impacted?
I think that you're always going to have creatives wanting a new set and a lot of cool, beautiful things made, customized. And I don't foresee the desire holding back anything there. I think that if you can get that going, Tate's going to be fine in that regard. What I do see a problem with is our budgets coming out of the gate and the willingness to spend money on those shows the first, say 6 months as we ramp back up. I think you're going to see a lot of the, all the larger headline acts that have had their contracts re-signed for 2021. They were all planning things in the beginning. You could argue that maybe perhaps a certain amount of that budget was still allotted for and maybe held for that still, and they'll still do the giant spectacle. But I think a lot of the smaller acts will not be spending as much money. So, I believe it's just going to be a proportional hit across the board. Once again, though, we're speculating. We're talking about the other end of this tunnel as if we truly know what's going to happen. And I know that people want answers, but there are no fucking answers to give. We can only look at something and be just realistic about what we would expect to reasonably happen. We could see a complete opposite thing turn around. We could see people that are so starved for live events that when you get to put them on, every goddamn thing on the planet is sold out. In which case, if pre-ticket sales go through the roof, that's when artists really start spending money on a show, because they know that they're protected financially in that regard, and they're going to deliver something even cooler. It's when an artist has pre-ticket sales in the shitter that they start ramping everything back and want to save every penny going out. So I think a lot of that is what's going to dictate how we will bounce back in all the various sectors of the industry. But once again, speculation.
I appreciate that. So shifting away then from the live, at least what's going now and what we can only speculate about in the future, why don't you tell us about some of your other business interests? Why don't you tell us again a little bit about the farm? And why don't you tell us about the Mod Pro services?
Well, the farm, once again, we looked at resources that we had and realized that we didn't need all of them. We had set them up quite well, and we thought, wow, what a great idea to be able to offer this to others. Once again, thinking of your quote unquote competition as not competition, but helping progress things further. And one of the things we saw a true use for ourselves was having a pre-visualization studio. And our offices are in a rather luxurious townhome on a secure property just off the Las Vegas Strip. And we built it out for our own use. And I quickly realized that we did some restructuring in the company. We changed some things around, and I realized I didn't need all of the space I had for myself and then the company. I said, wow, we could really expand the previs studios and open up what used to be my office, which is this rather expansive space. And I said, one guy doesn't need all this fucking space. I'd much rather be able to build a bigger studio to be able to bring a larger creative team in here and give a bit more service. Be kind of cool. And we started thinking about it. I had done a lot of research on pre-visualization studios. I was a huge adopter of previs studios when they first came out in the 99 or 2000, I believe. Pre-light studios was a huge thing. It was Norm Schwab and Tom Thompson and Rod McLaughlin and his wife Kim Gretheren. They all started what I believe was one of the first pre-visualization studio concepts. And they had a place on, I think it was Treasure Island in San Francisco, and New York had a spot directly across from the Empire State Building, which was at the time where the one I utilized the most. And I dove right into it. I thought it was the greatest thing because I was already using pre-visualization software for myself in a rather renegade freelance fashion. And when the job started getting bigger, I realized I needed more computer power. I needed more access to this stuff, and started utilizing the service quite heavily. And I learned a lot from them. And one of the things I did learn in the end, Prelight dwindled. They had a phenomenal run of well over a decade, but they ultimately dwindled because the market shifted quite heavily. The Grand MA Lighting, making the Grand MA2 consoles, started to put out a free version of pre-visualization software, because one of the big inhibitors of previs software was the fact that it does cost so much because it is specialized software designed for a specialized portion of the market. And MA kind of broke things, which is the blessing and the curse of it, by giving this thing away for free as a loss leader. And although it is not as pretty as the pay versions, 9 times out of 10, it absolutely suits the needs of what people need. So I looked at that. I looked at other legacy studios such as ESP Studios, and a lot of other people had done this over the years, and none of them thrived. They all sustained, but they weren't necessarily booming businesses. And I realized, particularly, as I say, this is the information age, and you can learn anything on the internet. We're also seeing the young generation learn how to do all those tools and utilize those services themselves. I found there wasn't anything particularly special about the technology provisioning of a previs studio. You certainly have to have quality machinery. You have to have super gaming computers to handle all the graphics and everything like that, and SMPTE distributizers and a little audio system, and all this stuff. But what I was seeing was my experience having prevised through so many years of doing it, whether I was in a studio or what started to become the norm was sticking the team in the corner of a warehouse somewhere with some pipe and drape, and that was their previs thing. And it was the most uncomfortable type of situation to be in, and was absolutely not artist facing. Like if you're doing, like if Corey Fitzgerald is doing a show for J-Lo and needs to present what they're doing in previs, the last thing he's going to want to do is walk J-Lo herself through the PRG warehouse. I mean, it's just not an artist-facing thing you want to do to a client. So in developing the concept, we realized, it's really not so much about the technology, the equipment, and the provisioning of the technology. It is about the experience of pre-visualization and what you're about to embark upon as a creative team. And usually what it is you're in a previs space for several days, working around the clock, cramming all of this time and energy into a virtual art form. And then you're going to move on site, usually seamlessly, because you're prevising right through the load into that thing. Get in there and then immediately start a very uncomfortable process of actually working with the physical rig. and you're just beating yourself up throughout the whole process. And that's what we do for a living. It's the nature of the beast. And so we realized what a wonderful thing it would be to be able to spend the first portion of that in a more luxurious setting, so that you can free yourself of a lot of the, the difficult things you would have to deal with. The first and foremost being comfort. And you could just work in a comfortable and creative space, which is what we had already developed for the activity in this space, and then subsequently developed into previous studios for ourselves. And we realized, well, why don't we just offer this as a service to all of the people we would normally consider us or them competitors? Any pre-visualization provider could utilize the space with their client. And so what we've ultimately done is delivered a rather luxurious and secure and comfortable experience as a haven for pre-visualization services that anybody, creative or provisioning wise, can have access to. So, for instance, David Perkins owns Imaginary Lights and Imaginary Labs. It is our preferred previs provider. He actually does all of our files for us, because we don't even bother doing them in house because there are so many people that are so good at them. He will have clients come in here and use the facility, and we just give him unfettered access to the computers remotely. So he can be in his offices in Orlando, and his team can tunnel in through it like a team viewer service and be talking directly and manipulating directly their client's file while they're in here working. So it enables the service to be utilized by way more people than just our clientele, and for our own purposes. And provides a much more luxurious experience. It provides a client-facing experience. We're in a secure compound with a private security team that blocks the compound. So you can't just walk into this place. You can't get on the property easily. You have to be announced. So it becomes very easy to bring a black car in with a VIP, bring them in rather clandestinely. You don't have to worry about paparazzi. You don't have to, we don't even have to walk people through the valet area or lobby area of the compound that we're on. We drive them right up to a set of stairs with a private walkway entrance right into the studios. So it provides that level of comfort for the artist. It provides the level of comfort to be able to show for a designer to invite the artist in to see the work presented. And then we have a lot of other services that go along with it. We have a private chef that will, on request, if they want to add this as a plan, they can have a meal plan set up where all the food is prepared in-house directly. So nobody has to leave the site to go, take an Uber to go to a restaurant to grab lunch, and to reverse that process, do the same thing for dinner. In normal previous situations like that, you can lose easily up to 3 hours of the day's productivity just in getting your team fed and coordinating all that shit. We can either have that where we organize that and deal with it so the team doesn't have to even think about it, or have their meals prepared right here to their liking. There's a lot of little perks like that just alleviate the creative team from having to manage that shit, and they don't have to deal with it. We just try to take it off their plate. And so that's the farm. It's just a very comfortable and client-facing creative previs space. And then Mod Pro Services is a whole other thing. We've had a few things that we shifted when we went into the pandemic. I saw obviously what was going to be happening, and I think I understood the gravity of what was about to hit us, and for how long, a lot sooner than a lot of people, and made an immediate pivot with several other industry folks. One of the things we did, we had a lot of stuff on the back burner that we hadn't dove into simply because we didn't have the time. And now, of course, everybody's got nothing but time. So one of the things we had been trying to accomplish for over 2 years now was starting an online store. We wanted to do a line of official merchandise, which sounds psychotically crazy for anybody in the entertainment design lane, but it was all the more reason why I thought it would be kind of a cool thing to try. We've gotten over the years, we've gotten incredible feedback on our branding and our swag whenever we would do T-shirts or giveaways, promotional items and things. And people have really gone crazy over it and have become these sort of coveted items. And many people over the course of the years had said, man, you should sell this stuff online. This is just like some of the coolest looking fun stuff. And so we kind of had this admittedly egotistical concept of trying to turn the branding of the activity into a bit of a lifestyle brand to some degree, and thought we'd give that a shot. So we started an online store called The Gear. It's th3gear.com. And I jokingly say I turned a multi-million-dollar design firm into a T-shirt company for the fucking pandemic, but it's kind of what we tried. And so we've got we're slowly building the store, and we're doing a lot of different items within that store, just as the pivot in a way. We had already been planning it, and we thought, well, this is kind of the perfect time to give it a shot. It's a nice slow roll. Probably a shitty time to get into the retail sector of the world right now, but also a sort of a safe time because it's a slow rollout and allows us to learn something that's pretty new to anything we've done. And as I say, nobody in this lane has ever done this, so it's definitely a very alone learning experience to some degree. And I've had to turn to some of my other business mentorship outside of the entertainment industry for a lot of guidance on that, and primarily from the military side of life, with a lot of veterans that have started up various lifestyle brands themselves, and friends of ours that have been influencers dealing with this type of thing. And so they've been sort of invaluable in helping coach it along, which has been really great. And then aside from all of that, we started a company called Mod Pro Services. And that's been sort of the biggest pivot out of the entertainment industry. This is an effort led by Andrew Gumper at AG Production Services. And for those that don't know AG, they have a rather visually iconic product that I'm sure most people have seen if they've ever watched any major festival. They have a thing called the mega structure, which is a giant arch structure that's utilized certainly at Ultra Music Festival and Coachella and a lot of others. They've used it for the Super Bowl many times. And Andrew has built a wildly impressive career and a huge production company himself, doing all the staging, lighting, video, and so on. And also has, obviously, because he's making these structures, a ton of manufacturing capability. And I think we were probably 2 or 3 weeks into the pandemic shutdown. We were on a Zoom call. There was a representative from AEG on there that had admitted that all major contracts for the major touring productions had been renegotiated and re-signed for 2021. And it was at that point immediately, Andrew and I looking at each other on that Zoom call, with the guy looking at our little pictures up there with this look of horror on our faces. And within the hour after that Zoom call, we're on a phone together talking about this modular concept that had already been done for another client for an experiential marketing campaign. And he said, we made these trailers, basically a shipping container, but they're built from the ground up. They're not repurposed shipping containers because those actually don't lend themselves very well to this purpose. And he said, we made these that interlock and are weatherproof and sealed and have all the electrical and HVAC in them. And sort of gave me the description of this thing. And he said, I think this would be kind of a cool thing to look into doing a field hospital with. And he said, would you mind driving up here and taking a look at what we got in the shop? I have these trailers that we already did here. I'll send you some pictures. And sure enough, we checked it out, and we immediately assembled an entire team of people to engineer from the ground up a set of these trailers that can click together to create an emergency field hospital. And these are quite different from a lot of the pivots that have been done within the entertainment industry with, doing, drive up COVID testing tents and things like that, which are great things for any company to try and do. Anything you can do in this particular situation to pivot out is a fantastic thing. But these are a little more involved than any of that kind of solution. They're made for true disaster relief. They're made to do more than just COVID testing. But we've done all of the engineering of this that includes electrical HVAC, HEPA filtering, biocontainment, fire suppression, all plumbing, and so on. We've learned more and become subject matter experts on more medical processes than we ever thought we wanted to. We were actually standing in the shop yesterday, shaking our heads, going, "Man, if you told me that this time last year that this is what we would be doing today, I'd tell you you're out of your fucking mind." We never thought in a million years that this would be what we would be manufacturing. But we've retooled his entire warehouse into a series of assembly lines to produce these. So ultimately what we've been able to do was save an entire contingent of staff who otherwise would have been out of work. And that was the impetus for the whole thing to begin with, was to desperately try and put production people back to work and coming up with the concept of it. So we immediately thought, well, the first thing we can do is we can have the design staff and engineers that we normally work with on other projects engineer this thing from the ground up. So we'll create some jobs there. The next thing is we'll be able to put a bunch of people to work on an assembly line. So we've got some production people we can put onto that. And then the third step, obviously, being now we can provide, as part of the business plan, a service to those agencies and companies that are buying into this product for their own uses, the training and staffing to be able to deal with it on site. Because at the end of the day, what we have created is just a different industry version of what we put together on sites on a daily basis for any of these festivals. The same site planning goes into play, the same structural engineering goes into play, the same delivery methods go into play. We've just engineered these things to also accommodate tons of other standards and certifications that we normally wouldn't have to deal with, because these are made to go together and be zoned as a permanent installation, even though they are temporary. So they're over-engineered well and above past that to meet things like all of the Army Corps engineering standards, NAFTA fire suppression safety standards, ISO shipping standards, and so on. So it's been quite an endeavor and a major pivot out of the industry. And it's been amazing to see it come to life because in studying this and becoming subject matter experts in this type of delivery of this product, we were, you immediately go and look at what the competition is. Firstly, has somebody done this already? Is somebody doing it better than whatever you dreamed up? And what we have seen thus far is that pretty much nobody has delivered anything other than conceptual renderings. And the thing that has made this product so different is that we have actually invested in it and brought it to life. So as we're recording this, we've got a team that is today putting in all the flooring and finishing plumbing installations on them. And I think perhaps by the time you're hearing this episode, we may be fully in the public eye. We have a press team that's working on doing all of the release launches of it, both locally and on a national level. And hopefully, by the time you hear this, this will all be publicly available to the world and ready to go, and hopefully saving lives at that time and putting people back to work, which is what we set out to do to begin with.
Appreciate
So that's
all of
my
that.
long-winded bullshit story of all the pivots that we've done throughout this.
No bullshit. Sounds like the hustle. That is what we talk about. We appreciate you putting people to work. We appreciate you using your creativity for a greater good. To our fans out there, Mod Pro Services. Thankfully, I said that one correctly. Mod Pro Services. Please check that out. Let's, show our support to Patrick for that venture.
Ironically enough, my next call today is about our website, because our website is currently a placeholding piece of crap, and we are about to do a big shift into a full, properly done website. We have a full web team developing that. So those of you going to the site, hopefully it is revamped and up by that point. If you go check it out.
Hopefully so, yes. And once it is fully revamped and up, please by all means tell us that so we can list it in our resource center at the Hustle Like You Broke website for people that can check it out there. Certainly want to be supportive. So
more importantly than anything else, we talk about the whole concept of hustling. I had warned a group of programmers and designers that I was on a private forum with about 2 weeks before the pandemic hit, and I tend to be a little more of a tough love kind of guy. I'm not particularly gentle when it comes to coaching people, because I find most of the time you got to snap them out of their funk and hit them hard with realizing the gravity of their condition. And I had warned these guys what was about to come, and nobody was really understanding it. And I said, the first thing you need to do is start to figure out ways of alternative income. And when we talk about hustling, you shouldn't be waiting for a pandemic situation to start your hustle or to start your side hustles. For this, a standard business model of personal finance is that you should have multiple sources of income. If you only have one source of income, you're going to work until you die. That's just how it's going to go. And you need to figure out ways. One of the most memorable things anybody ever said to me was, it was a neighbor of mine who's this entrepreneur, and he was he's a wildly intelligent computer programmer as well, and he was coming up with this algorithm thing that he was interfacing with eBay and a whole bunch of other stuff. And we were having lunch, and he was all excited that he finally did it. He cracked the code. He was struggling with it for weeks, trying to get the computer code to work. And he just said, man, I set out to do this because I just needed something that generated money while I slept. And that isn't necessarily a new statement in sort of the business hustling mentorship minds, but it's a powerful one, and it's a true one. If there's anything I could encourage everybody listening to do, is to start looking into other ways that you should be making money, whether that's in real estate, which should be a line you should be going down anyway, and then finding something else. If you have a craft or a talent to be able to manufacture something, to be able to make an online store that does that, whatever it is, you should really go and seek for yourself the ability to create other streams of revenue outside of doing what you love, which, if you're listening to this, you probably have this love for art and production and the concert industry and live events. And it's great. You should not give up doing those wonderful things, because they are fulfilling. They're usually profitable. They're a great way to make a living. But you should also be cultivating all of these other things. They are wildly important. And when the bullshit hits the fan, like it has during this pandemic, these are the things that could possibly sustain you or free you up to not be so wildly stressed out, like I often am, about, oh my God, how is this going to end? And be able to concentrate on some other things, be able to cultivate these other things. All we have is time right now for most people in this industry. If there's ever a time to start cultivating a side hustle, start learning new skill sets, just cultivating yourself as an individual, make yourself more valuable, this is it. You're hopefully never going to get this opportunity in your lifetime ever again. You really make the most of this time.
I mean, if we never said another thing on this podcast, this would kind of make a nice dovetail to the first episode we ever recorded, where that exact sentiment was discussed and addressed, and I couldn't have said it better. I'm certain I did not say it better myself. I do remember referencing the fact that I thought I had a diverse business between a number of clients in a number of areas and departments in which I was working across the industry until I realized they were all live event oriented. So, again, truer words have never been spoken. Diversification is something all of us should be considering as we develop our various hustles. And again, Patrick, you have been fantastic. We are now coming up on the end of our second hour. I would like to quickly move into what we call our quick hits before we wrap. Although I guess I would be remiss. Our tech support here at the podcast. His name is Sam, and Sam's been working with me for a number of years. Nobody hears his voice, but he is actively involved in all of our discussions. He's actively involved in all of the planning. When it comes to putting the podcast together, releasing it, he's the one sending the emails, the tweets, etc. And he has texted us at least 11 times in the last 2 hours. He's going to take exception to that number because it's probably closer to two. But I'm going to call it 11 times that he has texted us asking us to ask about your experience working with David Blaine and in the magic space. Please tell us something humorous, funny that Sam will appreciate.
Okay. It was only one project that I did with David Blaine, and I was a part of a larger team, and David was performing. He was filming a reality show. So we were rolling a lot of cameras. There's some footage online about all of this. Well, the event that we were working on was for a corporate event where he was to be the talent performing, and he was going to be doing some various in endurance art gags. And the first of which was we had a giant snow globe. And by giant, I mean this thing was probably 12 feet in diameter, huge water snow globe with fish in it. It was all lit up. And he would be dropping in from the ceiling upside down, Houdini style, dunked into this tank where he would do a breath hold for a very extended amount of time. I forget exactly how it was, either 15 or 20 minutes, just sitting in this tank on stage while other things were going on stage. He was literally just, it's like, oh yeah, here's David Blaine through this entire segment is just sitting underwater on a single breath hold. So there's a few interesting pictures on the web of me helping on the production design on that, where I am actually in the snow globe doing underwater knot tying and deal with rigging and cleaning it and a lot of other things that you don't normally see or call a typical day at the office, shall we say. You tend to have to go a little above and beyond in that regard. The other section of this is probably what Sam is referring to, that was a little more extreme. The next gag that David was going to do was catch a bullet in his mouth. And the reality of this was that we were helping David Blaine shoot himself in the face on stage in front of 10,000 people. And it's a pretty nerve-wracking thing. And he had been practicing it, and the margins of error for this are psychotic. And it really does require a lot of concentration and production design, and everything has to be right. Prior to that, because of my past experience with firearms and my involvement in the firearms community, I was asked to be a member, or basically lead a team to take David out into the Nevada desert to practice this. And sort of the more darkly humorous part of this was my vehement refusal to do any of it without having the Nevada state police involved, because I was not about to walk out into the middle of the desert to assist a celebrity shooting himself in the face. God forbid anything went wrong. This was not going to look good. There's no way you could really pitch this to a judge. Like, oh no, we were just practicing the stage gag. It didn't really work that way because we're using real bullets. He's catching a bullet in a steel cup in his mouth with a special dental piece that's created, and everything that goes along with it. And so it was a pretty nerve-wracking experience to be a part of. I do remember scribbling on a napkin in one of the meetings, isn't it fun to take part in planning the death of a celebrity live, and sliding it across the table to a colleague. Because what they were talking about to me was just absolutely insane. And in the end, David did, in fact, and this is all documented on his show. He made a last minute change, and we begged him not to change anything at the last minute. And he was pretty insistent on making this change to his dental piece because he felt it was a little uncomfortable. And he has a private dentist that was doing the molds and everything. And he flew him in at the last minute, and they made the adjustments. And we knew that we weren't going to, like, the testing of these adjustments was not to be a test. It was live at that point, anything that changed. And we had begged him not to do it. He went for it anyway. And sadly, it became the thing that did fail to some degree in the actual act. And so he pulled on a string on a rifle and literally shot himself in the mouth, caught the bullet. Everything went exactly to plan. Certainly with thankfully everything that we were involved with, it had worked perfectly. But unfortunately, the change in his dental piece actually allowed it to separate as the bullet hit. The pressure of that pushed the catch cup into the back of his throat slightly, and I believe caused a slight laceration. So, not being able to medically ascertain exactly what was wrong at the time, we immediately threw him in an ambulance, rushed him to the hospital to get checked and just make sure he was okay. And so the whole team went running. So it was definitely a different day at work. These are the things when you work outside the lane of just concert stuff. These are usually the things that are a hell of a lot more fun to me these days. Doing concert touring and stuff, designing those shows they are fun. It's a beautiful process. It's challenging and sometimes daunting. These things I absolutely love because these wild stories and crazy things. Like, how often do you really get to say you took part in shooting a celebrity in the head? Live on stage. But it was the ironic thing that I refused to be a part of this, taking him out into the desert and doing it. But for some reason, I was absolutely fine with doing it live in front of an audience of 10,000 people. So I'm not really sure what that says about me in the end. But,
I hope if out of all of these stories, you don't become known as the guy who takes, celebrities and shoots them in the head. I'd rather have no part in hearing that again, but thank you.
No, I've done way more to protect celebrities over the years physically than anything else. My God.
There it is. Sure. Well, I feel like there's so much more I want to ask you. I'm going to skip over most of our quick hits, frankly, because I do want to ask you one other question. If there's anything, and this kind of puts you on the spot, because there may be nothing that quite reaches the level of shooting a celebrity in the head. But is there anything out of the Michelle Obama tour that is worth relating that you think we should know about the experience, about her, about anything at all? Very curious.
Other than the fact she's one of the most impressive and humble and beautiful human beings on the planet, I don't know. Everything I did